up, we have a presentation on one person's family's participation in the voting rights movement in Selma, Alabama. Please welcome Jamila Snell.
You guys hear me? You guys hear me now? No? Thanks, girl. Okay, hi. So my name is Jamila Snell. I'm a senior, of course. Yeah, please start. Just let me know. Yes. Okay. Okay, so the title of my project is Remembering the Civil Rights Movement, One Family's Involvement in the Bloody Sunday. So just to start, I just want to tell you about how I got to this point in my project. During the summer, I thought about my capstone. I was talking to my mentor, James Beatty, and I knew that I wanted to do something involving the Black Power movement in some aspect. I didn't know if I wanted to do something Black feminism, or I wanted to do something about like the Black Panther movement, but I wanted to do something about the Black Power movement. And I was talking to him at lunch one day in the fall, and I just mentioned that my family was involved in the Civil Rights Movement in Selma, the town in which they grew up. And so we both decided that this project would have significant meaning. One, because the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday is actually this year, it happened in 1965. And also because you don't get a chance to really transcribe interviews of people who actually participated in the Civil Rights Movement, who were not just leaders, who were actually participants, who went past their daily lives in order to participate in something so daring. And they didn't even know it was daring at that moment, but the impact was so strong. So I just want to give you a background in case you guys don't know. Like, raise of hands, how many of you guys actually know about Bloody Sunday in 1965? Oh, okay, pretty good now. So this is like, literally like, this is a basic like explanation of it. There's a lot more that went into it. But basically, it happened on March 7th in 1965. It was led by Hosea Williams and John Lewis, who were leaders of these two civil rights organizations. And roughly 600 marchers marched. So they marched from Brown Chapel, a famous chapel in Selma, and they marched to the bridge. And their original plan was to march from Selma to Montgomery, which is 50 miles. And they wanted to do this to kind of protest against their rights being denied to vote. So when they went up to a voting registration place, they would say, well, count how many gumballs are in this jar. And of course, you can't really do that. Or they would say, name the judge, all the names of all the federal judges and the federal judges that were happened in the past. And it's like, what normal citizen would know that? So their 15th Amendment right was denied. So they were marching to bring awareness to that. And at the foot of the bridge were state troopers, white people of the community who were deputized that day, who had handmade weapons in their hands, so bats wrapped in barbed wire, or they had pipes or something of the sort, and they're given 2 minutes to turn around. And if they didn't turn around in 2 minutes, they would be arrested, and even worse. In less than 2 minutes, the state troopers and the deputies went on to the marchers and they started beating them. And this is known as Bloody Sunday. And 70 marchers were hospitalized and injured. And these photos were actually broadcast around the country, and it brought a huge awareness of what they were going through in the South. So I just want to give a quick overview of SCLC and SNCC. I'm going to go really quick because I don't know how much time I have. So, Southern Christian Leadership Conference basically started in 1957 with Dr. King as its president. It was made by mostly religious leaders, and what they did, they used various tactics to attain their goal. What people don't often realize is that the participants, even at the ground level, were heavily trained. And so they used these tactics to bring awareness of their struggles in the South. But SNCC was actually created in 1960, but as a heavily democratic organization, led and run by students and young people. And what they did, they wanted to empower the communities in which they worked. So they wanted the community to be able to bring awareness about their situation, like by themselves and for themselves. So they're really about community empowerment. Okay, so what my thesis was the conflict between these two groups. There's significant differences between the groups. Was the conflict between these two groups really significant? Because a lot of the scholars were saying that there's so much trouble between the leaders, and like they didn't even really want to work together sometimes. And I was like, is this problem really that significant? So in order to prove that, I had to interview my family. So the woman with the SFA aunt is my great aunt. The woman directly to her left is my grandmother. And the man I'm standing next to is my grandfather. So I interviewed these three people because they participated heavily in the Selma campaign. And so what I think is really important with my project is that I was not only looking into like kind of like the academic aspect of it, but I was looking into it because it's a part of my family oral history. And I think a history that we don't get in textbooks, and we're probably not going to get into textbooks unless we actually like change the schooling, system. But the participation of regular people who are not quote unquote extraordinary, even though they were, but like extraordinary in the sense that there are ordinary people who went to a 9-to-5 job. There are students, hundreds and hundreds of students left school in order to participate in this, but yet their stories are not recorded. So these are kind of like the elements that I explored after I did the interviews. I kind of looked at what are the social and economic backlashes of participating in this. Yes, there was the threat of death. There's always going to be the threat of death when you go against like the white power structure. But also it was economic. You had white citizens standing on the sideline looking at them and saying, I know that person's boss. I can get them fired the next day. Or I know this person runs a business. Let me make sure this business goes under. So stuff like that. Even my grandmother's mother lost her job because of their participation in the movement. So you have this kind of economic and social backlash. And also what would happen is that the KKK members of that neighborhood would dress in their robes and ride down their neighborhood. And if they put a cross and burned it on your lawn, you better be out of town by the next day or else you would have been killed. So you have this kind of sense, this danger around their participation. And I also want to look at the importance of the church. SCLC kind of used the church as a way to kind of make their cause, have more validity. So if you're looking at it from a religious sense, it's kind of like Dr. King, for lack of a better example, but Dr. King leading, he's like Moses leading his people out of Egypt. He's leading his people out of the sense of Jim Crow and the sense of like that, how do I say it? Basically Jim Crow, I also want to look at it at a sense of like a movement of families. You have family participation. My grandmother and my great aunt and their other sister participate as a family unit. You have that in there. That story is not really told. But also the reason why these participants did this, a lot of them said, yes, you want to make it for the future generation, but what's also important is that they want to make sure that their parents and their grandparents were able to utilize their right to vote. So it's a movement driven by families and not just for themselves. And I also want to look at the Selma film that came out recently. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I want to look at the Selma film and how does this movie portray the SCLC kind of versus like SNCC portrayal, but also the portrayal of the regular people who participated, not just Dr. King, not just Hosea Williams, not just John Lewis, but the actual people who went through this and risked so much in order to participate. So in the end, did this conflict between these two groups even matter? And I had 3 interviews with these people. It ranged from an hour to 2 hours. And within that time frame, it only maybe took 5 minutes for them to basically be like, no. It didn't really matter. They're like, you could be involved with SCLC, you can be involved with SNCC, but at the same time, for the people at the ground level, we didn't care who you're involved with. We had this one end goal, which is dismantling Jim Crow and ensuring our right to vote. So why does this even matter? Why are the scholars putting so much effort into saying that these conflicts existed when it only existed with the egos of the leaders, not the actual people who participated? So that's my grandfather at the bridge, this bridge that they famously marched across and were beaten at. And I was able to actually go for the 50th anniversary and be there with the, we call them foot soldiers, the people who actually participated. And I was able to walk across the bridge with my grandfather. So I think this project is really significant for me because I'm putting down my family history, but also the history of people who are kind of the unspoken heroes of something so important that we kind of take for granted today. So, thank you.